The Paul Leslie Hour, helping people tell their stories. And now, your host, Paul Leslie.
Hey, it's me. Thank you as always for being here. You're listening to the Paul Leslie Hour. Usually we get right into the show, but I wanted to take just a moment to talk to you all. First of all, the show is now in its 16th year. A number of you have said that you would like to support the show. Well, now you can. If you've ever gotten enjoyment or inspiration from the Paul Leslie Hour, consider becoming a patron. Just go to patreon.com/the Paul Leslie Hour. It's with great excitement I announce our special guest, Bob McDill. He is a legendary figure in the world of songwriting, now retired. A past guest on this show referred to him as a gentleman and a master songwriter. He's had more than 300 of his songs recorded through the 70s into the 90s. 31 became number one hits. He's been regarded as one of Music Row's most respected songwriters, and some of the artists who have recorded his work would include Don Williams, Bobby Bare, Conway Twitty, Loretta Lynn, Emmylou Harris, Alan Jackson, Waylon Jennings, Alabama, Keith Whitley. Among his many awards, BMI Awards, ASCAP Awards, he was inducted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1985. Bob McDill, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Paul. Glad to be here.
It's an honor to talk to you.
You too.
So you're retired these days. What would you say is the most beautiful thing about being retired?
Oh, gosh. Just getting up in the morning and not having anything to do is thinking about what you might want to do that day and knowing that if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. I garden some, and my sweetheart and I travel, and we're still big readers, and so it's nice. Every day's a Saturday.
That sounds beautiful. You just mentioned the traveling, and I know you had told me that you recently were in the United Kingdom.
That's right, yes.
How was that?
It was fun. We stayed a week in London and took advantage of that new direct from Nashville to London, and got to see Churchill's underground headquarters during the Blitz, and got to see the Dover fortress where they orchestrated underground, where they orchestrated the D-Day invasion, and a lot of other things too. But those two are quite memorable.
Do you still listen to a lot of music? No,
I do not.
Why is that?
Well, it's lost its appeal for me. I have two things I listen to. One is, and very occasionally, one is Puccini's arias, and the other one is the score from Braveheart. What an eclectic music thing that I have, but I really don't listen to anything anymore. I guess it's burnout of all those years of having to listen and having to be aware of what's new and what isn't, and so forth.
Now, both of the types, or both the selections of music that you mentioned there are instrumental music. Would you say that personally you're more moved or more interested in melody, or more moved and interested in lyric?
Well, either one can move me. I think lyric writing is a dying art. From what I hear on PBS, accidentally, and what I hear on the PAs, whatever those are, at Walmart and Home Depot and those, Walgreens and Home Depot and those places, lyrics are just chants. These lyrics are pretty much meaningless. These young people seem to have nothing to say. I know I sound like an old fogey, but of course I am. It seems to be the same, a string of tired old cliches that we would have. Well, never mind. I've said enough about that. I am sounding like an old geezer.
Well, I'm identifying with what you're saying, and I was born in the 80s. So I understand exactly what you're saying.
But I don't listen to country music anymore, or Americana. All I'm hearing is just the pop hits on the sound systems in department stores. So there could be some wonderful things in country and Americana that I don't even know about.
What about the music you grew up with? Tell us about the stuff that made a big impression on you.
Oh boy, we had everything. No generation will benefit from all that like mine did. Well, first of all, I grew up in the southeast corner of Texas, right there on the Louisiana border, and we had French Cajun music on the radio, and we had a lot of German population. We had German polkas, we had country, and we had the beginnings of rock and roll. We had Western swing. All this is on the radio, and then you get a little older, and television comes along, and you've got those variety shows with the opera stars from the Met singing the arias from the latest big operas, and you've got Broadway stars singing the big hits from Oklahoma and so forth, and the big Broadway hits. We just had everything. And then the big bands. And then Mr. Peer went south and brought all those great Latin bands up from Cuba and Brazil, and we had all that on the radio. So it was just endless.
So when you embarked on a career in music, what was your original vision? What was it that you were trying to accomplish?
Well, I didn't know. I didn't know. I liked to write songs, but I didn't know if that was going to be it. I figured out pretty quickly after watching a few recording sessions that I was not going to be a studio musician. I wasn't good enough. And so I just sort of fell into songwriting. That was really, I guess, my first love, and it survived all the other changes I went through. I was well suited for that, perfectly suited for songwriting, and not suited so much for leadership. It's what a publisher and a producer and these people have to do is lead, and I didn't want to lead anybody. Had no inclination toward leadership.
I have an album of yours on vinyl entitled Short Stories.
Yeah.
And I have to say, you are more known for your songwriting, but you sang great on that album.
Thank you.
Now, I'm hoping you can tell us, what are your memories of making that record?
Well, some of it. We brought some of those cuts, which are pretty rocking, like Goodbye Jim Crow. We brought the old rhythm section from Memphis up that Alan Dickey and I had known when we were working in the studio there. They were the studio band, Stan Kessler's studio. I brought them up from Memphis, and they played on some of those sort of rockin' boogie ones, but some of them we just built from scratch, like Come Early Morning, Catfish John. Alan and I just built those. I'd go out and put out the guitar and the vocal, and we'd start adding things, and that's where you get that jug band sort of thing with Come Early Morning. And Alan would put on a harmonica, and I'd put on a banjo, and so forth. Lots of fun back then. As Susan Taylor was around, she'd put on a mandolin and a little cymbal or a bell or whatever, just whatever we wanted.
I wanted to ask you about that song, Catfish John. We had Alan Reynolds on this show, which was a real thrill.
Yeah.
And he touched on it a little bit, but I think that your version of Catfish John is just the best. Tell us about the inspiration. What got that song going? You log those things. We don't realize until we look back how we log everything that sounds good to us. One of my dad's stories, he was a little boy growing up in rural Mississippi, and he was a big storyteller, and Catfish John was a friend of his when he was a little boy, and he told stories about Catfish John, things Catfish John would say. And he was a pretty rough old character, apparently, but when we had the hit on that, and I went home to visit for Christmas, and my dad said, "Well, you wrote a song about my old friend Catfish John." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, you cleaned him up a little bit, though, didn't you?" Because Catfish could use some poor bad language and be pretty rough, apparently. And that's why Mama didn't want the little boys hanging around him. as you were mentioning, you were mentioning Jack Clement. Was he a character?
Oh, a character, absolutely, yeah. He was a great guy, a great mentor, and I learned a lot from him. He had some difficulties as a businessman. The checks weren't always good, but Jack was a great character, and I learned a lot watching him. And he was very good to us. He let us just go into the studio, and the little crew that was around there, we were all, as Jack called us, we were all going through Cowboys College of Musical Knowledge. He just let us go into the studio with an engineer and just dink around and play and experiment.
Tell us a little bit about Alan Reynolds.
Reynolds was one of my two great mentors. He and Dickie Lee were my mentors. Alan's just a great guy, and he has a great ear for hits, a great ear for talent. And he's a very patient man. He's a gentleman. He taught me a lot of things, and one of them was get up every morning and go to work at songwriting. He used to give me these lectures when I appear to be lazy. But so many people never learn that, never get that lecture. Alan said, what did Henry Mancini said? Someone asked Henry Mancini, where do you get your inspiration? And Henry Mancini said, every morning at 9 at the piano. And Alan would preach to his young charges. So I learned that lesson. I passed it on to others too. Don Schlitz, for example. And it's very important. Some people come to town and never learn that lesson.
Would you say that you got this work ethic from him, or was it a combination of things?
Combination of things. I'd certainly heard Alan talk about it and heard him lecture me about it, but I wanted success, and no doubt about that. I didn't want mediocrity. I was always puzzled by people who, you find yourself as I did. I found myself with Bill Hall as my publisher, and with the best song plugger in town, the best staff in town, associated with Polygram, Welkin and Polygram and Universal Music, the best collectors and payers of royalties in the country. And was I going to go play tennis 3 days a week? Hell no. I was going to be in that office every morning, and I was going to work and put in a hard week, and then go play tennis. But I had so many friends who never learned that lesson, and they had these mediocre little careers as a result of it, you see.
I was listening to your song, Gone Country, and I was thinking about the fact that it's something that to this day continues, people going to Nashville to try to make it in the world of songwriting or performing or whatever. What advice would you give to a new writer who's arriving in Nashville today?
Gosh, I don't know. Networking, I guess. That's so important. You can't be over there in East Nashville trading songs with your pals and expect to have success. You've got to get in the studios. You've got to make yourself obnoxious. You've got to be heard. You've got to network. You've got to make friends. And I know of a couple of young people who sit there on the outside of the business and complain about what the music sounds like that's coming from inside the business. They need to be inside the business and doing those complaints, making those complaints and writing and networking. And as Don Schlitz said, it's more difficult now than it's ever been to get a song recorded. He said every big artist now has a posse. That's what he calls them, he's got a publisher and a producer, and he's got a handful of people that he likes to co-write with, and no one else can get in. No one else can get inside that egg that he's got. The artist is constructed around himself, or his people have constructed around the artist, and you've got to find a way to get inside those things.
On the note of co-writing, and you used the word posse a moment ago. You were using it to describe the entourage and all that. But
yes,
when you look at today's songs, it's like they're written by committee. You know, you see the names in the parentheses, and there's 5 or 6 sometimes. And
I know.
yeah, and when, holding up this short stories vinyl record that you did, most of the songs are 1 or 2 writers.
That's right.
Why do you think there's been this change?
That's interesting. I really don't know. I would not want to be in the business the way it's constructed now. Gosh, you've got 5 writers on a song. You go to the band, but not only do you have to share the award and the accolades, you've got to share the money. I mean, how much can there be when you divide a song up 5 ways, and the young writer probably doesn't own any part of the publishing, and he's ending up with what, 1/20th of the revenue or something. But they write, that's that posse thing, and I don't understand it, but that's the way it is these days.
I was interviewing David Lee Roth at his house in California, and I asked him, do you still write songs? And he said, it's not like riding a bicycle. It's like riding a race bicycle. You have to do it if you want to keep doing it. Do you agree with that sentiment? Do you think that you haven't written in quite a few years now? Could you go back to it and just write?
No. I think David Lee Roth is perfectly right. You've got to keep those chops sharp. You've got to keep it up and keep your mind sharp. And you've got to also know what the public will accept and what they want, and what the radio will accept and what it wants, and all those things. And I don't know those anymore.
On the note of writing today, I know that you write stories. Tell us a little bit about that.
I've written a lot of outdoor stories. Published a book of collection of outdoor stories, which most of them are previously published in magazine, about a mythical hunting and fishing camp based on my own hunting and fishing camp in Squeeze Bottom, Tennessee. A lot of funny characters based on real characters that I've known.
Are you writing anything at the moment?
Not a thing. Nothing.
When I look at a lot of the lyrics to some of your songs, like, for example, Song of the South, even aside from the music, the lyrics are just really, they grab you in, like literature.
Right.
Was literature a big influence on you?
It was. I was an English major in college and fell in love with, Emerson, Thoreau, and so forth as a freshman. And then there were years there when I had a great fishing buddy, Tom Conley, who taught history at South Carolina. He was a big history buff, wrote books about the South and the history of the South, and talented historian. And I've used this term before, we were sort of in danger of becoming professional Southerners there for quite a few years, and we'd get together over the campfire and talk about Southern lit and Southern issues and Southern history. So that and that song and Welcome Home Native Son, which Bobby Bear recorded, you probably never heard that, and Good Old Boys Like Me, and maybe another one or two, Roll On Mississippi, those all came out of those conversations.
You've really covered just about every single topic when you look at the breadth of the songs, everything from really, really, like Don't Close Your Eyes. It really, really affects the heart. And then lighthearted things like Baby's Got Her Blue Jeans On,
Yeah, thank you.
When you were writing that song, Baby's Got Your Blue Jeans.
Blue jeans?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any doubt in your mind, because, my wife and I went up to Tennessee not too long ago. We went to Chattanooga and we went into this bookstore, and there was this old lady, And the first question she asked us when we came in the door, she said, "Are you conservative?" And I said, "Well, on some things, yeah." And she says, "Good, because we are." And so I'm wondering, was there any doubt about you writing a song like that and trying to get it cut?
Yes, of course, but of course there was. It was way too rhythmic, way too R&B with that guitar riff in it and the subject matter and all those odd chord changes. But Bill Hall, the great Bill Hall, Colonel Bill Hall, my publisher, he carried that thing around for probably a year before we could talk somebody into recording it. And Jerry Kennedy took a shot with it on Mel McDaniel, and it was a huge hit, #1 record.
And that's one of those songs people just, they do not forget it.
Yeah. Well, it was inspired by that Little Richard thing, The Girl Can't Help It. So you see how those things, you look back and you think, well, hell, that's where I got that. The Girl Can't Help It, Little Richard. So those things stick in your head and they reemerge 20, 30, 40 years later, and you only realize it when you look back.
The majority of the songs you've had recorded have been recorded by country singers, but there have been a couple of others like the Perry Como cut, Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. Tell the listeners maybe about some of the songs that you've had recorded that you think are good that maybe they haven't heard. Well,
Juice Newton recorded some of my songs. She was kind of a pop singer, and some of them really good ones. I'm Dancing as Fast as I Can. The Village Voice did a review of that album, and 90% of the article, that whoever the writer was for the Village Voice, he spent 90% of the article talking about that song, which was not even a single out of the album, but I was really honored. And I've had some cuts by some cuts by some other pop artists, but no big hits.
This might be a difficult question, but who would you say is the finest interpreter, has done the finest interpretation of a MacDill song?
Oh, well, I don't want to say. I've got there are too many people that have done beautiful jobs. I could name you several, but not one. Don Williams, Dan Seals, Kathy Mattea, on and on, Bobby Bare. No one, but there are probably several more, too.
What did you think on the note of Bobby Bare of his album, Me and MacDill, the entire collection of your songs?
Well, I was disappointed. I don't think there was a big hit in that, but I was really honored, and it was a lot of fun doing it. I was there when we went down to Muscle Shoals and recorded that with Bill Rice and Foster and Wallace and some of those other great pickers down there. It was a lot of fun. Bear's a great interpreter of songs and a great friend of songwriters.
Do you still keep up with him?
No, I haven't seen him in, I guess, a year. I need to give him a call.
You were mentioning some of the finer interpretations, but has there been a version that really surprised you with what they did with it?
Yeah. The Grateful Dead recorded Nashville, recorded Catfish John and made it into a reggae thing. But it's pretty darn good if you want to dial it up and listen to it. But it's reggae.
Oh yeah, I've heard it.
Something like reggae.
It's really different.
Yeah, right.
Was there someone you always wanted to write with that you didn't? No. The writers I admire most, Paul Simon, Roger Miller, Joni Mitchell, those people would be my top ones, but I never had any desire to write with them. They seem to do very well without my help. I don't know. I think you and Dylan could have written a great one.
Oh, Dylan, yeah. Put him in that top 4, of course.
What would you say is the best thing about being Bob MacDill?
The best thing about being Bob MacDill. Interesting question. Having come here from a little hamlet south of Beaumont, Texas, and with a few $100 on an old Pontiac, and made my place in the business, carved out my place. That's nice. I ran into a couple of old friends of mine at the grocery the other day, Billy Swan and Bergen White. Swan was a writer, and he's retired, and Bergen was a great arranger, and he's retired, and we're all about the same age. And I was just thinking, and we all came here with nothing and carved out careers for ourselves and made a living, and that's not everybody can do that.
That's true. What was it like when you were inducted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame?
That was an honor. I think I was put in there with it was way back. I think I was put in there with I'm having a senior moment. Blue Suede Shoes, Carl Perkins. Yeah, Carl Perkins and I were put in that thing at the same time, and that was an honor. It was good to meet him. I had never met him, and talked to him a little bit backstage. That's what I remember most about it.
I always, at the end of my interviews, I let the guest just address the audience, and it's not limited in any way to music. What would you say to anyone who's tuned in?
Oh, gosh. I usually have a bunch of funny zingers that people ask me at the end of I'm often said, tell us what the biggest problem facing songwriters today is. And I usually say bad taste in clothing. And I don't know. I know people who work hard, and who knows? I think working hard and networking. You know, my friend Lang Martin, who was a great writer, he's now retired. And this is a little rough, but someone asked Lang if he had been possessed and obsessed when he was a writer. He said, yes, you'd better be obsessed, because that fellow over there you're competing with would murder his mother for a recording. You see what I mean? You have to be obsessed.
Yeah.
And it can't be a hobby.
We put all these labels on you. You know, you've worn different hats, mostly songwriter, but you've recorded yourself and you've sung. At heart, how would you define Bob McDill?
I have no idea. I haven't done much of that. Happily retired, having a good time.
I have to say, Mr. McDill, it's been a thrill to talk to you.
Where are you, Paul? You're
in Georgia.
Georgia, yeah, you're on the East Coast, aren't you?
Yep, 1 hour ahead.
I see, yes, right. Well, great, Paul. I've enjoyed doing this.
Yeah.
It's always talk about yourself, you know.
Oh, one more question, a real quick one. What's the best place to eat in Nashville?
Boy, there are so many, I'll tell you. It always kind of makes me angry when some tourist, some big diplomat comes to town or something, some movie star, and they take them out to the Loveless Cafe for biscuits and sausage, which it's good biscuits and sausage out there, but good Lord, we've got so many great places, named chefs. We like Etch downtown. That's Deb Paquette. She's a celebrity chef. And other places. There are lots of good places. There didn't used to be. When I moved here in 1970, gosh, the people out in West End had their country club, and everybody else had Jimmy Kelly's for steaks and corn fritters, and that was about all there was. And now it's really a food town. It's a restaurant town.
Not bad. Well, sir, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Okay, Paul.
Thank you very much. I wish you a wonderful Saturday.
I wish you one too, and I enjoyed talking to you.
It was a pleasure. Until next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ba-ba doodly beep bop ba-dee-da, dee bumpity boo, rapati kanaza jip Kila kanata gilla bond good jiga manga but this yeah hunger I guess I get back in I got the inga rocket tinga langa bo I can't oh goodbye.